I knew something was off the moment they called me into the living room. It wasn't unusual for them to want to talk. They always had something to say, even if I didn't ask for it. But today felt different, like they were preparing to tell me something important. "Sit down, son," my dad said, his voice sharp. I dropped onto the couch, glancing between both of them. They were sitting across from me, as usual, distant in their own way. My mother, with her arms folded tightly, always looked like she was holding something back. My father. His gaze never quite met mine, like he was disappointed even before I'd said a word, you know. "We've been thinking," my mom started, her tone light, like this was going to be some casual conversation. "You're getting older now. You've had your fun, but when are you going to start being serious?" I didn't say anything. I already knew where this was headed. "You need to focus on your future." "Your career," my dad added, his voice growing more firm. "You can't keep drifting. It's time you got a plan. We've always expected more from you." I felt the weight of his words crush down on me. My chest tightened, but I bit back my response. The expectation was always there, wasn't it? My life had been a constant push to meet their standards, to be what they wanted me to be. Not me, but their idea of me. I couldn't remember a time when I wasn't being molded into something else. And honestly, my mom continued, her gaze cold, "We're starting to wonder if you'll ever live up to what we hoped. You know, your cousin, he's already got his life together. He's making something of himself. Her voice trailed off. I swallowed hard. It wasn't new, this comparison. But every time it hit, it stung deeper. "I'm not him," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. They both froze. My dad raised an eyebrow. My mom gave me a tight-lipped smile, but there was nothing warm about it. "Excuse me?" My father's voice was low, almost mocking. "I'm not him," I repeated, more firmly this time. "I'm not going to be what you want me to be." The silence between us was thick. I could feel the anger building in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. "Well," my dad said, his tone hardening, "maybe that's the problem. You don't know what you want. You've never tried hard enough." I wanted to argue, to shout, to tell them that it wasn't about trying harder. It was about trying to live for myself. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. "Maybe it's time you realized you'll never be enough," my mom muttered, barely above a whisper, but the words cut through me like a knife. My vision blurred for a second, but I blinked it away. I couldn't let them see how much it hurt. I stood up abruptly. "I'm done," I said, my voice shaking with frustration. "Done trying to meet your expectations. Done living your life for you." I didn't wait for their response. I didn't care. I turned and walked out of the room, the sound of my footsteps echoing in my ears. The door slammed behind me, but even in the silence, I could still hear their voices, their disappointment. It was like a weight on my shoulders that I couldn't shake as I walked away. The anger inside me was replaced by something else, a realization. For years, I'd been living to make them proud, but now I was done. I was going to find a way to live for me. And no matter what they thought, it was going to be enough. I never thought I'd get to this point. But there I was, standing in front of my school's administrative office, holding a piece of paper that would change everything. The ink on it was still fresh, the words stark against the page. Withdrawal form. I didn't look back as I handed it to the secretary. I couldn't. I was terrified of what I was about to do. But at the same time, a strange sense of relief washed over me. My parents had always told me I'd never make it, that I was destined for failure. This was my first real decision. I wasn't about to let them define me anymore. The secretary handed me my final paperwork, her eyes flicking to the clock. I could feel the judgment, but I didn't care. I grabbed it and left the office without saying a word. I took a deep breath once I was outside, staring at the busy street in front of me. The world was bigger than the classroom, bigger than my parents' expectations. I was free, but I was also lost. A few weeks later, I found myself working at a run-down diner, slinging food to customers who barely even looked me in the eye. It wasn't what I'd imagined for myself, but the weight on my chest had lessened. I wasn't complaining. One evening, I was wiping down the counter when the door opened and a girl walked in. She looked different. Not in the way people try to stand out, but like she didn't care about standing out. Her eyes locked onto mine for a moment before she slid into the booth by the window. I hesitated before walking over. "Can I get you something?" I asked, trying to sound professional, even though my head was still spinning from everything that had happened. She looked up at me, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Yeah, I'll have a coffee and whatever your best dish is." Surprised me. I couldn't help but smile back. There was something about her. Maybe it was the way she didn't seem to care about anything. Or maybe it was the way she made me feel like I wasn't invisible. I brought her the coffee and the special of the day. When I set the plate in front of her, she raised an eyebrow. "This is your best dish?" she asked, clearly amused. I laughed, feeling a little embarrassed. "Hey, we do the best we can with what we've got." She smiled, then took a sip of her coffee. Fair enough. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. She looked up at me. "You okay?" I didn't expect the question, but it hit me harder than I thought. "Yeah, I'm just figuring things out, I guess. Isn't that everyone?" she said with a shrug, almost like it was no big deal. "I'm Lena, by the way." "Jake." I gave her a small nod. "Nice to meet you." We spent the next hour talking, mostly about nothing. It wasn't deep, but it felt real. She didn't judge me. She didn't ask about my life or why I was working in a place like this. She just listened, like she understood what it was like to be stuck in a place where nobody sees you for who you really are. As I cleared her plate, she leaned back in the booth. "You know," she said, looking at me seriously, "I've been where you are. Stuck, trying to please people who don't care." I froze, my hand still holding the plate. She didn't seem to notice. I used to think I had to be perfect, that if I didn't meet everyone's expectations, I'd never be anything. But then I realized, who cares about their expectations? It was like a light bulb went off in my head. You don't have to live up to what other people think you should be. "Exactly," she said, nodding. "Once you stop trying to please everyone else, you start figuring out what you really want." Her words hit me hard, and for the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't alone. She'd been through her own stuff, I could tell. But she wasn't hiding behind it or letting it crush her. She had a quiet strength I couldn't ignore. As the weeks went on, Lena and I spent more time together. I started staying after my shifts to talk to her, and the conversations always left me feeling lighter, like I was finally becoming myself. She wasn't perfect. None of us were. But she didn't need to be, and that was something I could relate to. One night, after a particularly long shift, I sat down across from her in the diner. "I think I'm starting to get it," I said, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "I don't have to live their life for them. I can carve out my own." Lena smiled at me, her eyes softer than usual. "That's the spirit, Jake. It's not going to be easy, but at least you'll be doing it for yourself." And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was finally starting to figure things out. I don't know when I started trusting Lena, but I do know that I'd reached a point where I felt like I could tell her anything. The late night talks, the quiet moments after work, they were becoming my lifeline. I found myself letting my guard down around her. For the first time, I felt seen, understood. It's like maybe she was the one person who wasn't going to judge me, but that all came crashing down. It was a Thursday night when it happened. I was sitting at the diner, exhausted after my shift, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked it absent-mindedly. It was a message from my mom. "We know what you're up to, Jake. We're worried. Talk to us." I stared at the screen, confused. What did she mean by that? I hadn't spoken to her in weeks. It wasn't like her to message me out of nowhere. My fingers hovered over the keys, hesitating. I wanted to ignore it to move on with my night, but something told me I couldn't. Something was off. I decided to call her. "Hey, Mom," I said, my voice betraying the uncertainty that had settled in my chest. "Jake," she replied, her tone cold. "We're trying to understand. Why are you throwing everything away? Your future. Your potential. You've been in contact with Lena, haven't you?" My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" How do you even know about that? We know, Jake. She's been telling us things. About your job, your plans. You think we wouldn't find out? The words hit me like a punch in the gut. Lena? She'd been talking to them? I felt sick. My chest tightened, my breath coming in short gasps. I hung up the phone without saying another word, feeling my hands tremble. How could she do this? How could she go behind my back like this? She was supposed to be the one person who understood me. And now? I walked out of the diner, the night air biting at my skin as I tried to wrap my head around what had just happened. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but all I could do was walk in circles, replaying the conversation over and over in my head. After what felt like an eternity, I finally made my way to Lena's place. I didn't know if I was angry, hurt, or just desperate for answers, but I needed to know why. I knocked on her door, my fists shaking. She opened it a few seconds later, surprised to see me. "Jake," she said, her voice soft, but there was something off in her eyes. "Why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Why would you do that?" Her face faltered, her lips parted as if she was searching for the right words. But all I saw was guilt. "Jake, I didn't mean to hurt you," she started, her voice low. "Didn't mean to hurt me?" I cut her off, my anger rising. "You went behind my back and told my parents everything? You're the one person I trusted, Lena. And you chose their side?" She flinched, but she didn't look away. "It wasn't like that." I thought, "What?" I spat, my hands clenched into fists. "You thought what? That telling them about me would make things better? That they'd finally accept me? Or that you could save me from myself?" Her expression faltered, her eyes tearing up. I thought you needed them. You're angry, I get it. But I didn't want to see you make mistakes." "Mistakes?" I hissed, my voice rising with every word. "This isn't a mistake. This is my life. My choice. And you went behind my back to try and fix me like I'm some broken thing. You don't get to do that, Lena." She looked down, her shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. They were so worried about you. I thought maybe if I could talk to them, they'd help you see reason." I wanted to say more, but the words caught in my throat. My chest was tight, my heart pounding. Every word she said only dug the knife deeper. I wanted to scream at her, to push her away, but part of me still wanted to understand. "I didn't ask for your help," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I didn't ask for you to choose them over me. I trusted you." She shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I didn't want to betray you, Jake. I thought I was doing the right thing. But it wasn't the right thing. It was the worst thing she could have done, and I couldn't let it go." "Maybe you should have let me figure it out on my own," I said, my voice hard as steel. "I can't forgive you for this." Her eyes went wide, the hurt in them cutting deeper than any words I could say. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. Barely audible, I turned away, the anger still boiling inside me. I didn't want her apology. It didn't change anything. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice firm. "I don't need you. Not like this." I walked away from her door, my heart aching with every step. But I couldn't stay. Not with the betrayal hanging between us. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't need her to save me after all. Asterisk, I don't know what I was hoping to find when I left. I just knew I had to get away. Away from the diner, away from Lena, and away from everything that reminded me of how much I'd screwed up. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Not that it mattered. After what Lena did, I couldn't stay around and pretend everything was fine. I packed a bag and left without saying goodbye. The city felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in on me. The noise, the faces, they all blurred together as I drove aimlessly down unfamiliar roads. It wasn't long before I found myself in a small town, the kind where everyone knows your business, but no one asks any questions. I rented a cheap room in a rundown motel and tried to disappear. My phone stayed off, and I hardly left the room. The days were spent in silence, my thoughts spiraling, and the nights were filled with restless sleep. I couldn't escape it. The betrayal. The crushing weight of failure. The constant thought that I wasn't good enough. It wasn't long before I met Ethan. I was at a diner, a hole-in-the-wall place where the food was greasy and the coffee always tasted burnt. I sat in the corner, barely touching my food, when an older man sat down across from me without asking. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice calm and knowing, like he'd seen the kind of trouble I was in before. I nodded, barely looking up. "My name's Ethan," he said, his rough hands wrapping around his coffee mug. "You look like you've got a lot on your mind, son." I didn't answer at first. I didn't want to talk to him, didn't want to let anyone in. But there was something about his presence, something grounded in him, that made me feel like he wasn't just some stranger trying to get into my business. "Jake," I said quietly. Ethan smiled like he could see right through me. "Jake, you know, sometimes we go through things that make us feel like we're drowning. It feels like the world's closing in on you, doesn't it?" I met his gaze, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like someone understood. "Yeah," said my voice barely above a whisper. "It's been a hell of a few months." He took a sip of his coffee and leaned back in his chair. "I've been there. I know what it's like to feel like everything's falling apart. Hell, I've been to places in my life that I didn't think I'd ever crawl out of." I stared at him, unsure if I should say anything. His eyes were steady, unwavering, like he wasn't afraid to look me in the eye. "I just don't know if I can keep going," I said before I could stop myself. "Everything I've done, it's like it's all falling apart. I'm lost." Ethan didn't look away. "Sometimes you have to lose yourself before you can find your way back. I spent years running from myself. I hid from everything, convinced I wasn't good enough. It was easier to stay in the dark." I frowned, trying to understand where he was going with this. "You're running right now, you know?" he continued, his voice soft but firm. "You think if you can just leave everything behind, the pain will stop. But it won't. You've got to face it, Jake. The only way out is through." I shook my head. "I don't know if I can do that. I'm so tired. I don't have the strength to face it all." Ethan leaned in, his eyes serious now. "You do? You've already started? You walked away from what wasn't working, from people who tried to make you something you're not. That's strength. Don't forget that." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had left everything behind thinking I was just running away from it all. But maybe, just maybe, there was more to it than that. Maybe I wasn't as weak as I thought. "I don't know if I can find my way back," said my voice shaky. "You don't have to find it all at once," he replied, his smile faint but knowing. "Just take it one step at a time. You'll figure it out. You've got more strength inside you than you realize." I didn't know what to say. He was right, but I didn't feel it yet. I still felt broken, lost. But somehow, hearing him say those words made something stir inside me, a small flicker of hope. I spent the next few hours talking with Ethan. He told me his story, how he'd fought through addiction, loss, and failure, and came out on the other side. He didn't sugarcoat it. He told me the truth, that it wasn't easy and it wasn't quick, but it was worth it, for the first time in a long while. I felt like maybe I wasn't as far gone as I thought, as I left the diner that night. The darkness didn't feel quite as suffocating. I still had a long way to go, but for the first time, I believed I could make it. I wasn't sure what would come next, but I knew this much. I wasn't going to run anymore. I was going to fight. The first day in the new city felt like stepping into another world. I had no plan, no expectations, just a vague sense of hope that maybe this time things would be different. I walked into the small, crowded office building, where I had somehow landed a job as an entry-level assistant in a marketing firm. It wasn't glamorous, and I had no idea what I was doing, but it was a job. And I wasn't going to let myself back out now. The first few weeks were a blur of mistakes. I stumbled through meetings, felt like an idiot most of the time, and could barely keep up with the work. But the one thing I noticed, something that surprised me, was that I didn't quit. I kept pushing. Every failure was a lesson, and every time I messed up, I tried harder to get it right. I was slowly getting the hang of it, and it felt good. The work was exhausting, but for the first time in a while, I felt like I was earning something. Like I was doing something that mattered, and then I met Sophie. I didn't expect her to change anything for me. Not really. She worked in the same department, a few desks down, and we often exchanged polite nods in the break room. She was the opposite of Lena in almost every way. But there was something about her, something that made her stand out. One afternoon, after another disastrous presentation, I sat at my desk, head buried in my hands, trying to figure out how I could possibly recover from this. Sophie must have noticed because she came over and tapped my shoulder. "Rough day?" she asked, her voice warm but not intrusive. I looked up at her, a little startled. "You could say that," she smiled, then leaned against my desk, casually. "I don't think I've ever seen you smile." I frowned, feeling a bit embarrassed. "Guess there hasn't been much to smile about." Her expression softened. "You know, that's exactly what I thought when I first started here. I didn't have a clue what I was doing, and every day felt like a failure. But you know what? I'm still here." I raised an eyebrow, curious despite myself. "And what makes that so great?" She shrugged. "I guess I figured out that failure doesn't make me worthless. It's just part of learning. I'm not perfect, and I've stopped trying to be. You shouldn't either." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "It's just hard, you know? I'm always messing up." "So what?" she said, grinning now. "I mess up all the time. Who doesn't? The trick is to embrace it. You've got to stop looking at your mistakes like they're a reflection of who you are. They're just mistakes. They don't define you." I blinked, feeling like she had just unlocked something in me. I'd been so focused on the idea of being perfect, trying to get everything right so I could feel like I was enough. But maybe that wasn't the point at all. "Sounds easier than it is," I muttered. Sophie's smile widened. "Of course it is. But the more you try to hide your flaws, the harder it is to move forward. Embrace them, learn from them, and then let them go." I didn't say anything at first. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I could almost hear Lena's voice in my head telling me that I had to prove myself. But then Sophie's words replaced it. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Not to my parents, not to Lena, not even to myself. I just needed to live my life. I took a deep breath, realizing for the first time that maybe I didn't have to be perfect. Maybe it was okay to mess up. Maybe it was okay to be me. Sophie looked at me as if waiting for me to say something. I met her gaze, feeling the weight of the last few months lifting off my shoulders. "Thanks," I said quietly, the words feeling strange, but genuine. I needed to hear that. Her smile softened. "Anytime. We're all in this together, right?" That simple statement stuck with me. Maybe I didn't have to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders anymore. Maybe I could learn, grow, and for once, be okay with who I was. Over the next few weeks, things started to change. The work didn't get any easier, but I started seeing it differently. I stopped beating myself up for every little mistake and started focusing on what I could do next. Sophie's words kept echoing in my head. "Embrace your flaws." And slowly I did. I found myself looking forward to going to work. Not because everything was perfect, but because I was learning. I wasn't doing it for anyone else. Not my parents, not Lena, not anyone. I was doing it for me one day, after a particularly long day. Sophie and I were leaving the office together, she said, as we walked out into the cold evening air. "I think you've come a long way since we first met." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Yeah, I think I'm finally starting to figure it out." She gave me a knowing look. "You don't have to have it all figured out. Just keep moving forward." And for the first time in a long time, I realized that was enough. Asterisk, the call came out of nowhere. I hadn't heard from them in months. Not since I left the city. Not since I shut everything down and walked away. I stared at the phone for a moment, wondering if I should ignore it, but I didn't. I picked it up. I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "Jake, it's your mother." Her voice was cool, controlled, but I could sense something underneath. "We'd like to meet. It's been too long." I didn't know how to feel. A part of me didn't want to see them. Part of me still felt the sting of their disapproval. But then there was this other part of me, the one that had changed over the last few months, and that part told me it was time. "All right," I said, the words coming out easier than I expected. Where? We'll meet at the cafe by the park. Tomorrow at noon. I didn't say anything else before hanging up. The next day, I sat at the cafe, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that was long gone cold. I kept my eyes on the door, waiting. When they walked in, it was like nothing had changed. My father, the same stone-faced man I'd always known, and my mother, with her ever-present, polite smile that never quite reached her eyes. They sat down across from me, their eyes studying me, their silence heavy. "I'm glad you agreed to meet," my mother said first, breaking the silence. "We've been worried about you." I didn't respond immediately. I didn't know what to say. "Worried about me?" I repeated, just to buy some time. "Yes, Jake," my father chimed in. "You're throwing your life away. You've left everything behind without any plan. You can't just keep running forever." I felt a familiar rush of anger surge through me. They always had something to say, always telling me I wasn't good enough. But today something was different. I didn't feel small under their gaze. "I'm not running," I said, the words coming out firm. "I'm living my life the way I want, not the way you want." My mother's smile faltered for a moment. "But you're lost, Jake. You've made so many wrong choices. You can't just ignore what we've told you all these years." That old feeling of inadequacy, the feeling like I was never enough, crept up again. But I fought it down. "No, I can't," I said, holding her gaze. "Because I'm not living for you anymore. I'm living for me." There was a beat of silence, thick with unspoken words. They both stared at me like they couldn't believe what I was saying. "You don't understand," my father said, his voice sharp. "We're just trying to help you. We're trying to help you avoid making mistakes." "By telling me what to do?" I shot back. "By controlling every part of my life? You think I don't know what I'm doing?" My mother let out a long breath. "We only want what's best for you, Jake." I shook my head, feeling the frustration welling up inside me. "No, you want what's best for the idea of me. The person you've always imagined I'd be. But I'm not that person, and I never will be. I've tried, but I'm done trying to be someone I'm not." They looked at each other, then back at me. I could see the disappointment in their eyes, but it didn't affect me the way it used to. They had always been the source of my self-doubt. But now, it felt like their opinions didn't hold the same power. My mother opened her mouth like she was about to say something, but I cut her off. "I don't need your approval anymore," I said, my voice steady. "I don't need your disappointment either. I'm building my own life. Maybe it's not perfect, but it's mine, and I'm proud of that." The words felt heavy in the air between us. I could see them both struggling to process it. To make sense of the person sitting in front of them, my father opened his mouth, probably to argue, but I stood up before he could. "Jake," he said, his tone colder now. "No, Dad," I cut him off. "I'm done. I'm done trying to meet your expectations. I'm done trying to fix what's already broken. I don't owe you anything." I grabbed my jacket, and for the first time I didn't look back. As I stepped outside the cafe, I felt something I hadn't expected, a weight lifting off my chest. I had stood my ground, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I needed their validation. The anger, the hurt, the disappointment, it was all there. But it didn't control me anymore. I was free. I'd built a life for myself. At least I thought I had. I wasn't the same person who left the city months ago, but there was still something hanging over me. A question I couldn't shake. What now? The scars were still there, even if the wound had healed. My parents were distant, but I didn't care anymore. I had started over, rebuilt myself from the ground up. But as much as I told myself I was fine, there was still one person I hadn't been able to let go of, Lena. I never thought I'd return to the city. I'd left it all behind, determined to never go back to the place where everything had gone wrong. But there was something I needed, something I had to do. I found myself standing outside her apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't even know if she was home, but I had to see her. I had to understand. When she opened the door, her expression shifted from surprise to something more guarded. She didn't say anything, just stood there, like she was waiting for me to speak first. "Lena," I started, unsure of what I even wanted to say. I've been thinking about everything, and I need to know why. She didn't move. Why what? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why you did it, I said. Why you told my parents everything. I don't need you to apologize, but I need to understand. I felt the anger that had once consumed me begin to fade. It wasn't about revenge anymore. I just needed answers. Her eyes flickered with something: regret, guilt, maybe even fear. She took a step back, inviting me in without saying a word. I followed her inside. She sat down on the couch, and I stood by the window, staring out into the city that once felt like home. It felt different now, unfamiliar, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Lena had a bigger part to play in that. I thought I was helping you, she said, her voice breaking the silence. I thought if I told them, they could get through to you. You were so lost. I didn't want to lose you. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had assumed it was all just about control, that she'd betrayed me because she wanted to be in charge of my life. But now I saw it. She had been scared. Scared of losing me, the person she thought I was. I didn't want to hurt you, she continued, her voice almost pleading. I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't want you to make the same mistakes I made. I looked at her, finally meeting her eyes. She wasn't the same person I'd known. There was a vulnerability in her gaze that I hadn't seen before. It was hard to reconcile with the girl who had once betrayed me so completely. You didn't trust me, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You didn't trust that I could figure things out on my own. She nodded slowly. You're right. I didn't. I was scared, Jake. Scared that you'd get lost, that I'd lose you. And when you left, I panicked. Her voice faltered, but she didn't look away. I wasn't thinking clearly. I took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. For the longest time, I'd wanted to hate her for what she'd done. I wanted to be angry, and I was in a way. But this was different. I wasn't going to let my past dictate my future anymore. I wasn't going to hold on to the anger. I get it now, I said, my voice calm. I get why you did it, but it doesn't change the fact that you betrayed me. Lena flinched at my words, but I didn't regret saying them. It was the truth. And for once, I wasn't afraid to face it. You don't have to forgive me, she whispered, looking down. I don't deserve it. I shook my head. It's not about whether you deserve it or not. It's about me letting go of all of this. I've been holding on to the past, thinking it would give me closure, but it's only been holding me back, eyes wide. So you're saying you forgive me? I didn't answer immediately. The word forgiveness felt strange on my lips, like it was something I wasn't ready for. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized she had no power over me anymore. My past didn't have to control my future. Yes, I said finally, my voice firm. I forgive you, Lena. Not because you need it, but because I need it. I need to let go. Her expression softened, the tears welling up in her eyes. I saw the relief on her face, but there was something else too. Sadness, perhaps. She had her own scars, ones I hadn't seen before. I never meant to hurt you, she said, her voice breaking. I just didn't know how to help. I know, I said quietly. But you can't save me, Lena. I have to save myself. She nodded, her eyes downcast. There was no more tension between us, no more anger. Just the quiet realization that we'd both been lost in different ways. But we didn't have to keep fighting. Thank you, she whispered, for understanding. I turned to leave, and for the first time, I didn't feel the weight of the past on my shoulders. I didn't feel burdened by what had happened. It was over. I walked out of the apartment knowing that what I'd just done wasn't just about forgiving her. It was about forgiving myself. And with that, I finally felt free. Asterisk, it's been years. I barely remember the person I was when I left, all anger and fear, chasing approval I would never get. Now, I've built something for myself, a life that's mine, not theirs. I don't need their validation anymore. It's not the way I used to. I walk into my apartment. The familiar scent of coffee and worn books filling the space I've made my own. It's small, but it's mine. I've worked hard for everything I have. I remember the days when I wondered if I could ever have something real, something I didn't have to explain to anyone. Now, I don't need to explain. The phone buzzes on the counter, and I know who it is before I even pick it up. My mom. How are you, Jake? Haven't heard from you in a while? I stare at the message for a long moment, the words hanging there. The thing is, I'm not angry anymore. I'm not bitter. But I also know that this distance, this silence, is all we've ever known. They never really understood me, and I've stopped needing them too. I type out a response. I'm doing well. Just focusing on the things that matter. I hesitate, thinking about whether I should say more, but I don't. It's enough. I don't need them to know every detail of my life anymore. They don't need to see me struggling to prove I'm worthy. I know I am. A few minutes later, my phone buzzes again. We miss you, Jake. You don't need to do this alone. I put the phone down, running my hand over the back of my neck. I know they miss the idea of me, the version of me they tried to mold. But that's not me anymore. Not in the way they want. I could call back, tell them how much I've learned, how much I've grown. I could explain how I've found peace, how I've stopped running from who I am, but I don't need to. I've already said everything I need to say with the life I've built. The past is behind me now. Every step forward has been my choice, and I've stopped looking back for approval. I know who I am, and I've learned that that's enough. More than enough. I take a deep breath, letting it all settle in. The weight of years of striving, of chasing something that wasn't even real, it's gone. I'm standing here in my small apartment, my own space, my own life. And for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm missing anything. I'm not the person they wanted me to be. I'm more than that. And I'm proud of it. I close my eyes for a moment, a smile tugging at the corners of my lips. I'm finally at peace with myself, and that's all that matters.